Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all that are attending. My name is Bill Papp. I'm a MySQL Principal Solutions Engineer. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the global standards that have emerged in our, in the world and what we all have to live with nowadays. First, let me just say that this is intended to be a general outline of general product direction. It's not intended for any sort of commitment to deliver functionality or code that will be presented during the presentation. The development, release, and timing of features and functionality are at the discretion of Oracle solely there. So to start off a little bit here, a little bit about the agenda, a little bit of what compliance overview is or what we're kind of seeing nowadays or have been seeing. We're going to go right into some code examples, examples of certain features in MySQL that could be leveraged and some code examples of how to take advantage of them. Following that, we'll get a little bit into architecture review. Some of the areas that MySQL you may or may not be aware of are able to leverage and further protect your environments. We're going to talk a little bit about the latest enhancements to our security. And then cover a little bit about security guidelines, deploying MySQL securely, benchmarks, some of the later benchmarks and things that MySQL has achieved in the security space. So first of all, security is job number one. What we have here are some graphs from a global partner summit survey of CIOs and CTOs between 2019 and 2021. Security is either number one or two, depending on which graph you're looking at, with the second one being cloud computing. And so these two areas still tend to dominate the thinking of a lot of decisions. In the data security world, we have a number of, a lot of letters out there. Data security regulations are proliferating worldwide. Globally, virtually everyone is concerned about these regulations and being compliant with them, and worried that there might be a new one coming down the pike. That means you're going to have to, really alter your operations. In the U.S. alone, each state has its own, data privacy laws, with California being the biggest that a lot of people are paying attention to. And this, combined with existing regulations like SOX and GLBA, are still foremost in many people's minds. So, and again, data breaches, it was another record year last year for data breaches. As we saw in the national news and worldwide news, across some industries, manufacturing and utilities are getting hit on in some cases. And there were over almost 1,300 data breaches in 2021 compared to 1,100 the year before. So things aren't going away. If anything, attacks are getting more sophisticated, and ways to cover and protect yourselves is becoming much more important. So really what I'm going to first step through is some how-to examples in MySQL. If you're using MySQL, you definitely want to harden your environments and be in line with these government regulations that are there. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A at the end. My friend Nicholas is on board to be able to help address any questions you see along the way. And if we don't get the questions to you, we can also be in touch via email. So really, first of all, in MySQL, a lot can be done just out of the box. Your DBA doesn't have to be logging into the operating system anymore. A lot of functions have been made such that they can accomplish the same thing through SQL. And this is a common best practice now in light of these data regulations. All DBA actions must be audited. So that means that the DBA is not allowed to actually subvert any of these mechanisms. The auditing in MySQL can capture any commands that are there and put them into the record. Conversely, OS admins, system admins don't need to be touching MySQL. Auditing and all can be done with little, initial installation. Commands are not exposed. Many of the features that we'll be showing today are plugin based. So it's really simply a matter of leveraging a plugin or installing it, or in some cases checking to make sure certain plugins are available. Also, we've strove to make things more DevOps friendly, service oriented, and hopefully so that you can do this on a regular basis, hopefully weekly, monthly, quarterly, so that if something does come up, it's very easy and quick to fix. So the first thing when you're installing MySQL is the initial root password. And depending on how you're installing and what platform, you may or may not be prompted for the root password. If you are installing on Windows systems with the Windows installer or in Debian, which is a flavor of Linux, you'll be prompted for the root password. If, however, using RPMs or Yum or other utilities, you may not be. So the first thing you want to do is reset the root password if that's the case. When you install the server, the first thing will come up, just to let you know, is that a random password has been generated and it's been placed into a file in your directory. And at that point, it can give you the steps to go in, get the information, and then complete the installation. Optionally, also installing a MySQL secure installation so that you can ensure that the server configuration is sound. So an example here of would be on the command line, and say in Linux, you can say MySQL and connect, and then you can get the information from the .mysql secret file, grab the value of that password. You can do a test to make sure that it does fail, and then it'll prompt you to reset the password. And then you can go ahead and test to make sure that the password is correct. In the case that you have multiple roots, where you have root users or multiple root users, the first thing you want to do is make sure that they're not unconstrained, that they aren't able to log in from everywhere. So you want to review those logins. If you see a % sign, meaning a wildcard, they can log in from anywhere. You want to remove those and limit access as much as possible, and that only the root at localhost is allowed to change the password. So other things are password policies. One of the things that have been placed into MySQL over the recent years is enforcement of password requirements and policies. You can check and see if this component is installed, the password policy component, and this is referred to in the documentation if you wanted to review further on it, what's there. So you can also query on from the system the variable name, the global variables, and do to see if the variable name is valid, and it'll spit back what the valid parameters are for your environment. So things like the password length, the count, the complexity, special characters, yes or no, these are all things that you can tailor to be in line with your organization to make sure that they are consistent. Also, there are some password policies here. You can set password policies. If you don't have access to the operating system, so you can't edit the my.cnf file, which is the primary configuration file, or you don't have access to the command line to launch some of these as you launch the server, you can now use things like set persist to do these things. And here are some examples of setting password policy arguments this way. If you're trying to kind of deter brute force attacks and things on your systems, there is a connection controls plugin available that you can check for, see if it's active and installed. And what this will do is allow you to specify certain delays such that for each time there's a failure, it'll increase a delay interval so that if someone's trying to do a brute force attack, it's going to take longer and longer, and hopefully they'll just give up in the process. So installing and setting, you would at the server level, you can install the plugin connection here, and then you would persist it and set your values for what the threshold is or what the delay in number of seconds would be to match what your requirements are. Also, certificate of authorities. If you want to replace your SSL variables, there are ways to allow change SSL options without a restart. So these are, again, a query to be able to query on this information and then alter the instance to reload your latest certificates. For those that are maybe doing business with the US government, are required or are required to be FIPS compliant, you can check and see if FIPS mode is turned on. It is an additional configuration option where you are linking with certain variables and certain libraries to be FIPS compliant. So you first have to set the SSL FIPS mode variable for this to happen. Also, SSL required if you want to ensure that your connections are encrypted by default and SSL is turned on, you can check and see that whether the required secure transport variable is set and enabled in your environment. So a little bit on set persist, as mentioned a little bit earlier, this is an alternative way of setting these parameters without having to edit .cnf files that can also control, or if you don't have access to the command line, there is documentation as to how setting variables are, and also what the list of non-persistable variables are. So there are some that can be done this way, others cannot. And also there is a auto.cnf configuration that you can specify in the data directory and to see if the timestamps, the epoch timestamps are enabled. Permitting import and export operations. If you want to make sure a secure file check is there, you can see whether the ability to reduce the attack surface is there. You can set a secure file privilege and see whether it passes or fails. Also, if you're loading data from CSV files or doing bulk loads on maybe a regular basis, one of the parameters related to that has to do from what directory you can load these files. So by default, loading it locally is off. So you would have to be on another system to load your data across the network, and therefore have more scrutinization on your access. For users, there's a number of different types of users or classes of users in MySQL. Some are internal users, some are using X.509 protocol, others are external. They may be partners or things to your organization, or proxy users. So for internal users, for authenticated internally, you can run some code here that will go and check to see what their access is. If you're looking to see if the MySQL native password, which is less secure, although still allowed for legacy applications, you may want to check that and maybe issue a warning for someone to switch over to the more secure caching SHA-2 password mechanism. Also, if you need to check if a user is using X509, here's an example of the query to do that. If you're integrating or you would like to integrate with your already in place authentication mechanisms like Active Directory or LDAP or Kerberos, there are many options that you can do. Here's an example of a query to check the plugin to see if LDAP is enabled and turned on. Many companies are going to these types of authentication schemes to have be better informed and aware of if there's someone that's connecting and it's not within the required parameters. Also, a multi-factor authentication is a good way to ensure that you have the users here. You can, in addition to creating a user Alice here, you can then add a second and or third way of identifying Alice that's there. And again, a lot of this is documented in our documentation, as well as in some third-party guidelines, if you're interested. Roles and proxy users. So if you are setting up your users, you probably have some that are developers, some that are admins, some are management, and they may warrant different types of access to data. So you can configure this, show your grants for your app developers or for your administrators. Check and see what they are for available, and any sort of time-based metrics on that. So you have also the ability to dictate connections, whether certain folks are connecting a certain number of times, or if there's a maximum to that. Then you can say what your max connections are, and this might be something that is periodically being altered depending on your business needs. Also, you have the ability to grant specific privileges to any role, any user here on the DB, on the schema itself, tables, columns. They all have unique privileges, be able to write or read from, and who can access them. For those that may be familiar with MySQL Workbench, this is actually an easier way to get this information. Is you can graphically see sort of at a glance what the grants are for different types of users, the scope, can they insert, update, delete, what is their access to various components. And that's at the schema level. We also have the same ability at the table level for discerning who can access a table and work with that. Here's an example of a query that can show you what the privileged source is for many folks. If it's plugin based or user based, what the type of privileges they have, and being able to figure out whether they do in fact have the need to have this authority. Working further, here's a users or roles that have access to Actor. Actor is our sample database many of you may be familiar with, but here's an example of some code that will test to see whether someone has access to this specific table or not. And further, does a user have the ability to select on a certain table? There may be certain ones that are privileged and only certain users have the access to it. Here's an example of being able to code that into your routine or make it into a UDF or something that could be called from your application code to test this. For any given table, in this case, Actor, you can have a list of roles who have the ability to modify the data. So we see that there are some here that app developer, app write, it will dump it out into a format that you need. And again, be able to upfront know if these people have access to it. Plugins, many of the things as you're seeing are very much plugin based, and that really depends on whether the plugin itself is installed and or turned on. So sometimes you may want to install or missing or uninstall, or if your unused plugins, periodically review them. If they're no longer being used, get rid of them to free up the overhead. And this is all available in the information schema along with information about other system components. Another capability you have is the ability to dictate where people can connect from. If you want them to only be able to connect from the office and not outside of work, for example, and or if they're connecting to certain ports. We do have by default the port for MySQL is 3306 for standard SQL, also 33060 for our XDev connectivity, which is advanced functionality. And then you can designate other ports just for administrators only if you'd like. So here's an example of a query that will pull this information out and displaying it to you, which ones have full access. So in this case, we're testing for root 2 can connect from anywhere, say a super user on the system. However, standard root can only connect from the local host and does have all the privileges. Checking where your files are stored. Here's an example to make sure. Perhaps you're going through a system upgrade and there's going to be some changes to partitions on your systems. And you want to make sure that the base directory, data directories are moved to the right partition. Here's a way that you can quickly check and make sure that MySQL has these changes in there. As far as for those that may be encrypting data and using keys, you can check to see if your key is safe. Is your keyring installed? So again, this is being pulled from the information schema plugins to see if the keyring file is active. This would be required if you're trying to integrate your encryption, your transparent data encryption into a key store like HashiCorp or AWS or Oracle Key Vault to be able to enable that functionality. At-rest encryption, here's an example where you can check to make sure that your InnoDB table spaces themselves are encrypted. So you can go through and do a pass-fail check on that from the performance schema and information schema tables. And for quite a long time now, we've provided the ability to encrypt your undo log, redo log, bin log and audit log. So many of our large customers do have requirements around this. So this was added a few years ago. So here's some examples of being able to find this out on the fly. Another thing is auditing. Auditing is the ability to track all the activity that's coming in and out of the server, who's logging in, where they're logging in from, what queries they're running. And this by default is stored in XML or JSON format and can be turned on or off dynamically. So you first may want to check if it's loaded, if it's active, what the status of it is. In addition to that, you have some rules as to who's auditing, what the username is, the host that they can set up, any sort of filters. You are able to filter the activity that you do want to track or that you don't want to track. One of the newer tools out a few years now, MySQL Shell, gives you the ability to not only speak SQL, but also speak JavaScript and Python. So if you have some queries, some of the queries that we saw earlier can be, copy and pasted into MySQL Shell and checked on, or you can run some JavaScript or Python utilities, some built into the product, and or you can create your own to run and incorporate on a regular basis. Here's an example from a simple Python script. If you want to first understand what plugins are turned on, if you have access control. Here's an example of being able to copy and paste this into your Python code up front, and if it fails, you can decide whether you want to further launch the application and keep it going. So again, if you have any questions, please let them know. We do have Q&A set up. And so next step now is just to kind of map some of the things we saw to some of the MySQL security architecture that is available to you. So overall, we really have several areas that we focus on for security: authentication, authorization, encryption, firewall, auditing, and masking. And these are all available through the Enterprise Edition of the product. Also mapping to a general security profile, there's really 4 categories that are used here. The ability to assess a vulnerability, locate the risk, the vulnerabilities, ensure that the necessary controls are in place. Next would be prevent. You want to be defensive. MySQL has encryption, user controls, and access. And you can use this typically as a first step in trying to comply with certain data standards that we saw earlier. Detect, obviously, you need to detect it as soon as possible if there is some sort of breach or some sort of violation of your rules. So we have tools like Audit, like MySQL Enterprise Monitor, and like alerts that could proactively or quickly notify of these breaches. And then finally, recovery. Want to be able to go through understand the incident itself, the result of it, make sure that your service is not interrupted, that there is a fix available. May need to open up a ticket with Oracle support and see if there is a known issue with something. We actually more recently have had such a thing with a certain CVE. For occasionally we'll see CVEs that may be in violation, and some patching and things are required to address these. So just to kind of go through the Enterprise Edition, some of the security things, I mentioned TDE, which is transparent data encryption, the ability to encrypt your data within the tables themselves. This also interfaces with key management protocols. KMEP is the acronym for the standard there. And also we have about 6 or 8 backend providers. If you're already using Fortinet or HashiCorp or AWS, we also have integrations with that. Authentication is the ability to simply directly authenticate against your Active Directory or LDAP or native Kerberos implementation. We also have standard encryption. So if you have source code and you want to be able to encrypt a certain column like credit card number or social security number, there are libraries available for doing that on the fly. Data masking is the ability to display data securely, showing the last 4 digits of credit card numbers and social security numbers, anonymizing your data sensitivity. If you're a developer and you need some test data to test on things, you're not allowed to use actual live data. So we provide libraries and routines for anonymizing this. Firewall is a database firewall, not to be confused with a network firewall, an additional layer around the MySQL server to be able to block injection attacks or be notified of them, any sort of intrusion detection. And you can integrate this with Enterprise Monitor and alerts to be notified. Audit we spoke of earlier, actively user auditing for regulatory compliance. Typically, this is data that might have to be held onto for some period of time in the event that a breach is found. Enterprise Monitor, as mentioned, is a graphical tool, browser-based, gives you an at-a-glance view of your servers or any sort of issues they have as far as performance, as well as security, database schemas, passwords, database changes. All of these are viewable in Monitor. MySQL Enterprise Backup is basically the best way to back up your MySQL data. It does allow for encryption and compression for backing up data. A great alternative to folks that may be using, say, MySQL Dump, which gets slower and things over time and is not secure. Enterprise Backup is. And finally, enterprise thread pooling. This is actually a kind of a compound function that benefits performance. This allows you to sort of minimize and control how much resources of MySQL are being used by the system. But at the same time, from a security standpoint, it also does make denial of service attacks harder because the connections are rotating in and out using various methods, various things like round robin and things. And so if you take a look at the enterprise security architecture here and how we are able to kind of go around here, first with Workbench, the Enterprise Edition in particular, you have access to audit data, user management right from the Workbench. You don't have to use a command line. You can do it all from there. Enterprise Monitor will help identify vulnerabilities, do monitoring and alerting, alert you if there's any sort of hardening policies that are being violated. User management, backup monitoring, schema change management. Also things like Key Vault, if you are using transparent data encryption and you are integrating with a Key Vault, make sure that that is secure. Data encryption is there. For high availability, the ability to configure your cluster in a very secure manner, making sure there are secure connections between the communications. Enterprise backup can be encrypted. Enterprise audit, the ability to understand what's happening at the server level and quickly act on that. Thread pooling for performance, as well as denial of service prevention, really, that's there. And again, as you can see, these areas do map to the assess, prevent, detect, and recover categories we spoke of earlier. So as far as what's new, sort of coming up here, we just released 8028. So it just came out about 2 weeks ago, I believe. And with that and some of the prior point releases, we have LDAP and SASL Kerberos integration, native Kerberos integration. If you were in the cloud, if you're using MySQL database service in the Oracle Cloud infrastructure, we have integration with identity domains that are built in. If you are interested in using passwordless or dongle-based, device-based encryption like YubiKey, we have ways of configuring and setting that up. And then multi-factor authentication, we spoke of a little bit earlier. You can now have up to 3 different ways of validating that a user is legitimate. So really, what we currently have, we have the ability to encrypt your InnoDB, redo logs, undo logs, mid logs, audit data. That's all there. What's coming in a future release is the ability to have secure storage for sensitive system variables. So we saw earlier how you're using set persist for these. This will allow encryption of this and or secure storage of it. And then if the server variable is marked sensitive, instead of going to an OS file, it will be stored or pulled from the keyring, which is already present in the MySQL server. Also, for those that have integrated your key store with MySQL transparent data encryption, we're going to add the number of servers that you can fail over to. Currently, it's set to 2. We've had a request from some of our bigger customers to expand that. We're going to bring it up to 64, although up to 9 was requested. And these are for folks that may be deploying this thing worldwide and need multiple servers to connect to. In Firewall, we're going to expand how users and account whitelists are handled. Currently, it's a one-to-one relationship between users and account whitelist rules. Going to expand that to be many-to-many, where you can create some group profiles. The profile can have multiple accounts and members, and then you can create defined named allow lists and assign them to user accounts. So a little bit more flexibility overall in the management of what kind of rules are applied to a class of user. In audit, we have the ability now to, if you're running an analyze table statement, to have the results added to the audit trail and expand upon capability of audit API message emit UDF. This is user defined. It's in the documentation where you can actually customize the type of information that is added to the audit log for your particular purposes. Perhaps you want to document what application it was, where it was being run from, any of that. It can be done through this mechanism. Also, we can, be able to remove and groom the data by time, date, and size, and also have your events reading and starting from a specified date and time. So time-based functions built into that as well. In addition, now you can scrub your sensitive data in the audit log or obfuscate it if it's there. We've also consolidated the way that simplified the way that timestamps are done to use an epoch time-based format in Linux. We have log grooming, as mentioned, and then we're going to actually have this current release that just came out. We've added a global start and stop for auditing. So if worldwide you want to stop auditing for maintenance or what have you, that is easy to do. We've had some updates to TLS, which is the underlying encryption that we're using. You're now able to reload your TLS certificate online, and we also have support for TLS cipher suites that are here. Keep in mind also that older versions and version 1 and version 1.1 connection protocols are now deprecated. So if you're using an older version of TLS, keep in mind that at some point it's going to be removed from MySQL, and you'll likely have to upgrade that mechanism. Also, there's been an upgrade to the OpenSSL libraries that are bundled. They've now been updated to 1.1.k, 1.1.1k, yeah, that's there. And there's more information at the openssl.org website about this. Also, currently, for those that might be using InnoDB cluster and are using MySQL router, we now have the ability to move your connection creation overhead from the server to the router. So this would help balance any sort of activity that's there, and then only accept connections if destinations are available. So that's another way to securely ensure that no one's connecting that they shouldn't. What's coming is protected storage for certificates. Stored on the keyring, enabling adding and rotating new MySQL connection. Also want to add support for OpenSSL and FIPS object models 3.0 and recent GA releases are using these updated standards. Also, just miscellaneous, if you wanted to update the JSON comment field when you're adding a user, you might want to document who it is or what location they're in or anything, you can now do that. And then you could also revoke if something exists, or if it doesn't exist, have logic to again, fine tune the privilege that a user has. For masking and de-identification, if you're looking for ways to de-identify actual data, We do have a number of routines in there for that, for masking actual numbers or primary keys on certain tables. You can do it here as opposed to do it at an application by application basis. It may be more cost effective and easier to manage by doing it at the server level. And then, again, this is in line with compliance with GDPR, PCI, HIPAA, those that require de-identification data. We also have data masking at the string level. Some can be dictionary based, specific for Social Security and payment card, depending on how strict you want that. Last 4 digits, last 2 digits. And from a developer standpoint, if you're wanting to test out an application and you need test data for that, we give you several different ways of generating random numbers, email addresses, payment card, Social Security that are basically fake. Pretty much much of what we spoke of today is in the documentation. If you go to the security section, you can drill down and read more about some of the details of these. We do have a security guidelines part of the documentation here for SE Linux or for FIPS support. Please, by all means, do that. Also, we've had a number of large customers that do business with the government. And so a STIG, the Security Technical Implementation Guide, or compliance with that for the Enterprise Edition is available. So several of my large customers have been very interested and glad to see this. If you want to find out more about internet security benchmarks, there is one available online at cisecurity.org. That describes MySQL Enterprise Edition compliance with this regulation. And so finally, we want to just put out there, if you have any other requirements, please reach out to us. Many of the things that we saw today were the result of customer requests over these past years. We'd like to know what your pains are, what strategies you see as important, and you can request via email or use case. If you give us some sort of time frame as to when you want something, we would love to hear about it. So with that, questions. I don't know if we can open up the lines here, or if questions are in the queue. Just see. Tina, are you able to open up the lines, or?
Yeah, if you check Q&A, there are some questions under Q&A.
Okay, I do see some of the questions that have been answered here. There were questions around hardening guide for MySQL database servers. We do have that online, as well as with the CI security. Question around roles and stuff. Roles can be used with other roles, so you can mix and match as needed, and there is information about that in the documentation. For those that are asking, yes, we will provide a copy of this presentation so that you can take a look at some of these code samples and perhaps incorporate them into your environment. There's a question as far as using LDAP-S. We do have our LDAP authentication functionality documented. For those, if you wanted to address questions, we still have forums.mysql.com where questions can be posted and are regularly answered by staff there. There's a question around the recent CVE for log4j, which came out about a month ago, a little over a month ago. The only affected component of that for MySQL is MySQL Enterprise Monitor. And for that, we do have a patch. If you are using Enterprise Edition and Monitor, you can download that patch and get the fix that way. But there is no other components in my MySQL Server or Enterprise Edition that are affected by that CVE. For those that have asked, yes, we'll get a copy of the presentation to you. There's a question around security measures for community. There is a link on there. Security best practices. Some of the best practices do involve Enterprise Edition, not community features. For the question about multi-factor authentication, yes, starting with our prior release 8027, multi-factor authentication is supported. So you would have to upgrade to that point release to get that functionality.
Hey, Bill. Can you take a look at the first open question?
Okay. It's going on 12:45 now. I think we'll be here for another few minutes for those that have other questions or issues.